clearly there is one big story in town. The Prime Minister's interviewed this afternoon, Dominic Cummings, allegations, what the Conservative Party should do next. What would you like to see happen next? Do get in touch and we'll get your emails in just a couple of minutes. But first, as we've been discussing, the Prime Minister has denied essentially those latest attacks from Dominic Cummings. He's mounted a full-scale rescue plan to try and bolster his job, his career, to try and save his position after the allegations we've seen, the drip feed of allegations over the last couple of weeks. Well, we can now discuss this with the news editor at Conservative Home, Henry Hill, who joins us down the line. Henry, very good afternoon to you. I suppose the first question is, what did you make of Boris Johnson's interview a little bit earlier?
I mean, the government's holding position is essentially to hope that they can weather the Sue Gray report and that there will not be sufficient momentum amongst Conservative MPs to get rid of him immediately, and that will buy him the space to recover. But the lines being offered by the Prime Minister are extraordinarily thin. You know, this most recent one is that he will resign if he misled Parliament, but only if he knowingly misled Parliament. Well, you know, the definition of the word knowingly is that he will already know whether he did that. That's not something that Sue Gray's report can tell us. So it really is remarkable to see the Prime Minister's defence effectively being that he simply had no idea what was going on, which is in itself not a great position to be in as Prime Minister. And there's also an obvious tension between the phrase, I take full responsibility for what happened, and other people are going to pay the price for what happened. And yet, you know, if you read about Operation Save Big Dog or whatever they're calling it, it does seem to be that dismissing other members of the Downing Street operation is central to his plan to save his job.
This afternoon, there's some lobby hacks in Westminster, some reporters there suggesting that there's been a meeting of MPs from the 2019 intake who may well be putting letters in to the 1922 committee. Have you heard anything along those lines, or what's your sense of where Conservative MPs are at in all of this?
So yeah, I've seen those reports as well. It wouldn't surprise me. I've not spoken to any MPs from the 29 intake specifically, but broadly speaking, I think the thing that's most concerning for Conservative MPs, they're caught in a vice really, because on the one hand, not only is this story very bad and it's kind of destroyed Boris Johnson's personal ratings and thus the government's ratings, and the whole reason he was Prime Minister is because he had that unique ability to connect to the electorate. But also, we simply have no idea when this story is going to stop. They hoped that it would be done over Christmas and that the government could start pivoting back onto its agenda in January. Now we're sort of coming up to 2/3 of the way through January. We're still neck deep in this story. We don't know when the next email, photograph, whatever, is going to come out. So that's deeply problematic. But the other side of the vice, if you like, for Conservative MPs is simply the fact that this is a very, very bad time to have a Conservative leadership contest, because the mechanics and the procedure for that are quite drawn out. And the last thing you want if you're about to sail into a cost of living crisis and energy crisis is to have your Chancellor and other senior members of the government off stumping to Conservative associations when they should be focusing on the day job. I think the reason that people were originally talking about waiting until after the local elections is not just because they would be a good test of the Prime Minister's popularity, but also simply because summer is the best time to have a contest. So they're in a really tricky spot at the moment.
In saying that, aside from what MPs think, what do your members or Conservative supporters, I should say, think about this? There was a poll out last night effectively saying lots of them didn't believe Boris Johnson on this, but they still wanted him to be Prime Minister. And there is a section of the public out there, maybe quite a large section of the public, who think that we should be focusing on other things in the media. They're bored to death about hearing about this subject, and they still want Boris Johnson to continue on, almost irrespective of what has happened in Number 10 over the last 18 months to 2 years.
So there's conflicting evidence on this. You know, there is one poll that did find a majority of Conservative members want the Prime Minister to stay on, at least for now. Conservative Home's own survey, we did a snap survey of our own panel of party members earlier this month, and we found that even though we phrased it quite stringently, you know, we said, you know, the question was, do you think the Prime Minister should resign right now? We found a majority of respondents who've previously given the Prime Minister sort of 90+% approval ratings. A majority of them wanted him to go. So activists in the country are going, you know, they will be split on this issue, and activists naturally will tend towards loyalty towards the Prime Minister and the government more than the country. But I think that ultimately, if you're a Conservative activist, especially if you're preparing for the local elections, And I was in the Red Wall at the weekend. I was talking to councillors there, and what they're finding is that bits of council wards that they won only a year or so ago, where in November when they were doing their initial knock-ups were going, yeah, of course we're still voting for you, confident. They're now getting really bad responses, and it's because of Boris Johnson. So I think even if you're an activist who actually goes out and campaigns, then you're going to necessarily be receptive to the public mood, and the public mood is undeniably very much tilted against the Prime Minister.
OK, Henry, appreciate your time and your thoughts this afternoon. That's Henry Hill there from Conservative Home, joining us down the line. Must be said, one of my colleagues, another journalist, saying he's been told by a pretty loyal Conservative MP on that interview that we played a little earlier on in the programme today, saying it was awful, that the Prime Minister looked absolutely beaten. It was like a bad amateur dramatics performance. I don't buy it, and the public don't buy it. What do you think? We've been asking you to get in touch. Lots of you have. Kate says, I'm sick to death of hearing about Cummings. I've had enough. He isn't in government anymore. Who cares? Jonathan says that the boundaries between work and social were blurred in Downing Street. The rules were draconian. People meeting outside do not spread COVID. Andy says, though, that Boris made the rules. How can he not know them? He doesn't need to know what the Grey Report says to know if he obeyed the ministerial code or not. Michael says, my thoughts are that we need to rapidly move on from this partygate malarkey. I have to say I love the word malarkey. And Thomas says, problem with Boris's excuse is that he made the rules with his cabinet, so how could he not know what the rules are and his cabinet made personally? Get in touch.